This video is sponsored by Real Moms Exclusive Motherhood with a Touch of Class.
Okay, so my name is Clara Ifa. I'm a professional HR trainee and I have a 3-year-old boy. I plan to have just 2 children, or 3 maybe. That's if I have twins. I really want to have twins. I wasn't feeling too well for some days. And so I told my husband that I want to go to the hospital. Because I was married, I expected that it could be pregnancy. So I told him I wanted to go to the hospital. So he took me to the hospital and then we did some tests and then the doctor said I was pregnant for 4 weeks. Initially, I didn't have any symptoms until 2 weeks after finding out I was pregnant. I was in the office and I felt a sharp pain. And so I went to the washroom and I realized I was bleeding. So I called my doctor and then I told him I was bleeding. And then he said, then maybe I have lost the pregnancy, so I should come to the hospital. He was a doctor at Kolebu at that time. So I told him that I don't believe I've lost the pregnancy. So I ignored him. He kept calling my phone and I didn't mind him. I got somebody to get me a sanitary pad. But after some time, the pain was unbearable. So I started crying and then my colleague called my husband to come and pick me up. So he picked me and took me to hospital at Dansuman because I told him I didn't want to go to Kolebu. He took me to a hospital at Dansuman. The doctor requested that I do some scans. So throughout this, after I did the scan, then he said because I have an history of ulcer, that's what is triggering the pain and the bleeding, but the child is safe. So he gave me some medicines to take care of the pain, but the pain was so unbearable. It took about 7 days. So for 7 days, I couldn't really eat any solid food. I was just taking white porridge. Yes, that was all. So when I'm in the house, I have a flask of white porridge by me, and I was just taking it maybe after every 10 minutes. Just sip something small. Then after the 7 days, the pain went down. Then I started throwing up. So I started throwing up and spitting all over the place. I didn't know what was happening. So we went back to the hospital and the doctor was like, oh, it's normal. After 3 months, it will go away. So he asked me to chew ginger. But the thing was not going away. After 3 months, it didn't go away. I vomited and spitted the whole of the 9 months. About 7 months into my pregnancy, I was going for antenatal at a small clinic close to my house. So after 7 months, they requested to transfer me. And I asked them to transfer me to Kolebu because it was my first birth. And so they did that. And then when I got to Kolebu, I was going for, because I was 8 months, I was going for antenatal almost every week. And then on my 39th week, when I went to the hospital, they requested that I do a scan. And then when I did a scan, the doctor looked at the scan. The first scan said everything was normal. But when I came back, he said he wanted me to do a specialist scan. So he directed us to a specialist to do a scan. And then when we did the scan, the specialist said the baby was underweight. It was 2.0 as at that time. So the weight was too low. Talking to us, they said a whole lot of things. What could possibly happen to the child if the child is underweight. The child might not be normal, come out with abnormalities. So I was scared. I was very scared. In fact, I cried. My husband was the main support. He was praying throughout. And then people were giving me suggestions, eat a lot of this, eat a lot of that, take this, take that. So that I should take salad every day, take fruit juice every day. So I started that. And then by God's grace, when we went back to the hospital, the next week, the child had increased from 2.0 to 3.0176. The interesting thing is I didn't feel labor. I didn't have any signs of labor. And so after the 39th week, I went to the hospital, and then the doctor checked my baby. They have a way of pressing the tummy to see the position of the baby. And he said my baby was not positioned well. So he asked me to go and do a scan. I went to do the scan, and the scan said the baby was positioned downwards. I came back, the doctor checked, and he said, no, that's not the position of the child. So he said, okay, do you feel any labor signs? I said, no. And so he said, go home, let's wait for 1 week. So we're doing that. I'll come to the hospital every 1 week to check, for them to check if I'm feeling any labor signs or not. And I was still not feeling anything. And my tummy was still up instead of coming down. So on the 42nd week, when I went to the hospital, he said, you can't let me go home because I'm not feeling any signs of labor. So it's either they induce me to give birth or they have a CS. But before then, I have to do a scan, another scan. So he asked me to go and do a specialist scan again. When we went to do the specialist scan, the baby was positioned downwards. When we came back and gave him the results, he said, the baby is positioned downwards. But he asked me to lie down and check so that he could check. When he checked, the baby was not positioned downwards. He was like, am I sure they did a scan well? I said, yes, they did it well. And he's like, no. So he asked me to lie down for some time. He positioned me in a way for about 2 hours. And then he came back to check. When he came back to check, the baby was positioned downwards. Then he was like, okay, so let me prepare the nurses to induce you. But after some time, he said, no, let me check for the last time. So he asked me to go to the emergency ward. They had this scan there. And then he asked them to scan my tummy to see the baby's position for the last time. So he was just scanning, and all I heard him, like, he shouted. He was like, hey! So I was like, what is happening? He was like, do you see what your baby is doing? So he asked me to look on the monitor, and he called in other doctors to come and see what was happening. So my baby was just moving all around. He was just positioning himself all around. So he would position his head, then he would position his shoulder, then he would position his tummy. Like he was just moving in my tummy like that. So the doctor was like, no, this is a life and death issue. So they have to prepare me for an emergency CS. So that's how I delivered. So immediately they had to clear the theater and then do a CS on me. Okay, because I already knew he was a boy, but I didn't know how big he was. Because the scan earlier was saying that he was underweight and later he was 3 points, but I didn't know that 3.0 was that big. So when he came out, he was so big. The cheeks were so, like, the cheek had covered his face virtually. And the doctor said, like, see your child. So the doctor just smacked his buttons and he was like, stubborn boy. And then he asked him to take him. But I was very, very happy to see him. He was perfect. He was just nice. Very, very. So after delivery, I think it took 2 days for it to come. But the doctors advised that I should just keep him on the breast. So I'll just put him there to suck and then put him down. But there was nothing coming. And because he was sleeping a lot, so I didn't really experience much challenge. He was not crying. He was not crying at all. He was not crying at all. He was actually named there. But they were calling him Asumdwehene of the ward because he was so peaceful when he came out. Very peaceful. When we got home, he was crying a lot. And I didn't know what was happening. So I kept giving him breast milk when I heard him crying, but I didn't know he was experiencing colic. So my husband had a friend who was a doctor at that time. His house was not too far from my house. So one dawn, he just kept crying, and then my husband called the doctor. He asked us to bring him to his house, and then he put him on a flat surface, raised his leg up and started moving it. Then he became calm. Then we saw that he had just passed his phases, so he explained to us that he was experiencing colic. So he prescribed some medications that we could use for him when he starts experiencing that, and then he was fine. So apart from that, the only issue I was having with him was he was taking the breast milk all right, but I noticed that on Mondays he refused to take breast milk on Mondays. With that, I took him to the hospital. I did what I could, but he didn't stop. And he was like that till he grew up.
Every Monday?
Every Monday. And he was born on Monday. But so on Monday, he wouldn't take breast milk. He won't take water. He would just be there. He would sleep, wake up, be active normally. But if I tried to give him breast milk, he'll reject it. I tried to give him water too, he'll reject it. But on Tuesday, if it's Tuesday as early as 1 a.m., if you give him water, he will take. You give him breast milk, he will take. And he did that till now. He's still doing that. I don't know why. Okay, so circumcision. We got the nurse to come to the house to do it. And it was not easy. I actually ran away. It was my husband that stood by. Because when I saw the way the blood was coming out, the way he was screaming, I stood there for a while, but I couldn't. So I just left him with my husband and the nurse, and then I entered the bedroom. So I left him and then my husband there. When they finished, my husband called me to come out. He's like, they are done. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? I made sure he cleaned all the blood before I came out, but he was in so much pain. It was not easy. It was not easy. He was in so much pain, and it took about 7 days. So we didn't sleep for 7 days. He was crying. I had to give him a lot of paracetamol syrup, and that. But after 7 days, he was fine. So my son doesn't like food. That's the thing. Apart from he refusing to eat on Monday, he didn't like, I don't know, moving from breast milk to real food was very difficult because he stopped taking breast milk early. I think as early as 8 months, he stopped taking the breast milk. He refused to take the breast milk, and taking the solid foods was difficult. He refused to take the solid foods that were given him. So I think the only thing he liked taking was porridge. The white porridge with milk. So then I'll prepare I try to do it and mix it with other things like fruits, granule paste, and other things. So that's what he was on for about 2 years. I think it's the talking, because I didn't know he was talking. At that time, he had started schooling. He started schooling very early. I think when I resumed work, after my 3 months leave, I took some extra months, and so about 2 months, and then he went to school. So he started school at 5 months, and so I didn't know he was talking, because when I pick him up from school and we go home, he just makes the normal sounds, bubbly, and then all of that. He never said mommy or daddy or nothing. So I didn't know who was talking. So what surprised me the most was one afternoon I was in the office and the teacher called me. And then I heard the child said, Mama, Mama. So I was like, Auntie Faith, who is that? And I was like, that's your son. And I was like, when did he start talking? And I was like, oh, Micah has started talking like about 2 weeks ago. I was like, really? It's like he has never said a word in the house. He's always quiet, sitting in this corner like playing with his toys. So he never says anything. So that was the surprise I had. Working and parenting, it was not easy. Because sometimes, apart from the fact that you wake up at dawn to take care of the child and you wake up in the morning very tired, there are days that the child is not feeling well. You have to meet deadlines in the office. And I don't even know if I want to go there, but it was not easy at all. Because the early stages of my child, I think after 8 months, he started falling sick a lot. And sometimes I felt like I was doing something wrong. I didn't know what was going on, but it was constant. I was going in and out of the hospital. He would fall sick, we'll get to the hospital, and it's like, there's nothing wrong with him. We'll come back home. The doctor will just prescribe some medications to keep him okay. We'll come back home, he'll be fine for some time, and then he'll fall sick again. And it's like most of the time we didn't know what was happening to him. He'll be running temperature. Sometimes he'll go off, like he'll just go off. He'll get to the hospital and he'll just be there, like lying there. And the doctors will be like, they will run all the tests and everything is normal. He'll just be there for some hours and then he will just come back. And the doctors will be like, he's fine, we'll take him home. So it was not easy. It was not easy at all, but when he was, after 1.5 years, then he became normal. Everything became stabilized again, and then we didn't go back to the hospital. So the challenging aspect of motherhood was because I was a first-time mother, some of the things were new to me. Like things like, I don't know, some of the suggestions that the mothers will make or the in-laws will make, like do for the child. Maybe they have traditional medicines, like they say put it in his nose, sano, like those things. They were new to me. I wouldn't say they were new, so new to me. I was scared because of the stories that I had heard of people. So I didn't want it to be done to my child, but one way or the other, the mothers were winning, because they'll be like, do this, I'll refuse. The child will be crying and crying, and then they'll come and do it, and the child will stop crying. So that's some of the challenging things that I learned, and then it also taught me to learn to tolerate others, because when you give birth is when the third parties come in, and sometimes if you don't take care, you wouldn't be able to tolerate people, and it could go a long way to destroy a lot of things. So I learned the hard way. Sometimes I'll get angry, but I thank God. I thank God for the people I found myself with. They were understanding. I heard my child call me mommy. That was the most rewarding part for me. Like I knew he was going to call me mommy, but I don't know. I think I was expecting it. So I don't know. I think the first time he called me mommy, I think I was cooking. So he wanted something in the kitchen. He came in and he said, mommy. I don't know, I think I stopped what I was cooking and I just picked him and I hugged him. That was the most rewarding moments for me. I was just waiting for those words. I think the last thing I wanted to say is the afterbirth challenges, because after delivering they just said, oh, you'll be fine, don't do this, don't sit on hot water, don't do this, you just be fine. And I didn't know that you could have complications after birth, like infections and infections. Because after birth, I think 1 month after birth, I just come back from the salon, going to the washroom, and then I felt a sharp pain around my waist. So I don't know, but immediately I sat on the floor, and then I realized that I couldn't move properly. The pain was too much, I couldn't move my downward part. So my husband rushed me to the hospital. He rushed me back to Kulubu. It was around 9 p.m. And at that time, the doctors were on strike. So the nurses looked at me and they said, there's no doctor available. So they have to take me to another hospital. So my husband's friend, who was a doctor at a private hospital, asked us to bring me in. And then he looked at me, and then upon examinations, he realized I was infection. I had an infection as a result of the CS, and that was what was causing the pain. And so I had to go through a lot of treatments, UIDs and all of that before I was free again. So that's what I really want people to look at, the complications you could face after CS. Yes. You don't always go free like that. Sometimes you have some complications.
This video was brought to you by Real Moms Exclusive, Motherhood with a Touch of Class.